Yep, we're all set. We're on.
We're on? We're good?
Yep, we're good.
Sweet. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Sustainiacs. I'm Michael Vincent, and I'm just trying to figure all this stuff out. I've got two great people with me. One I've known, well, both of them I've known for about a year, one better than the other, but she's Emma Wightman. Emma, how are you doing? She is my co-host and partner in crime.
Yeah, I'm doing great. You know, we got another artist on with us tonight, Jen Lewin. We are very excited to have her here. It's going to be an amazing show. So yeah, Jen, welcome.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, we're glad you're here. When you said another artist, I was like, I'm not an artist. You're not an artist. And you're talking about before we did a show with Rosie Sherwood. We call her the nomadic artist. She's in England and lives in a van and drives around and stuff like that. But but Jen, internationally recognized artist and engineer from Brooklyn. Hey, you can find her work being enjoyed by millions of people, really, from Tokyo to Istanbul and everywhere in between, no matter which direction you go between the two of them, right? Is that pretty much accurate, Jen?
Yeah, I've been doing it for a long time, and I have two kind of bodies of work. One are these large traveling exhibitions they travel all over the world. And then I also have a bunch of permanent work. Most of the permanent work is based, outdoor public permanent work is based in the US, although I have some pieces scattered around Asia. But yeah, been doing it for over 27 years.
Wow.
And I love it. I'm going to do it forever. So.
Awesome. Yeah, so is this one of your pieces in the background here? For those of us watching?
Yeah, that's actually a prototype. Was one of the very first prototypes for a big permanent piece that's hangs in the center of the Minneapolis-St. Paul airport.
Wow.
Oh, really? Oh, cool.
Yeah,
cool. I got to know Jen because she did from The Last Ocean, which I am president and CEO of OPT USA, the division in the Americas, which we've just started up recently. But those panels came. You worked with Oliver Nuds quite. I love it. I think it's incredibly cool. Some of my favorite footage is the guys in South Africa, like dancing on parts of it. Yeah, which was very, very cool. But Im Jabula actually wasn't at Super Z. I saw Super Z doing it as well. Very cool guys. But I have to tell you, my favorite one is Edison Cow.
Yeah, Edison Cow was really fun.
That is one of my favorite ones.
Ursa Minor, the big infinity-mirrored bear that actually travels around with The Last Ocean, has also been really loved. So,
no, I think that one is super.
People really love the animals. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they're super cool.
Is all your work collaborative, like community-based and interactive?
Yeah, the vast majority of it. It's almost all interactive,
Wow.
And almost all of it is public art. We do occasionally have private commissions, but even the private commissions are usually in big public lobbies and public spaces, where we can really kind of activate public participation.
Wow. Okay. Cool. So let's set the stage first of Jen Lewin Studios. Is there a mission there? What is the mission behind it? And then I'd love to get into how you got there and that type of stuff. But first of all, Jen Lewin Studios, what is it? Why is it important? What's your mission?
Well, honestly, the studio evolved organically. So I'm going to jump a little bit into how I got here.
That's fine. However you want to do it.
Yeah. I was a kid that, I grew up on Maui and I was running around Maui without shoes on. And I was a dancer, a classically trained ballerina, but I loved science. In the 80s, I started taking apart an old computer and I learned to program really young way back in the early days. And I was sort of told my whole life, however, that I couldn't do both. It was like either left-brained or right-brained.
Right.
Yeah. You were either an artist or an engineer.
Right.
And I bought that story for a lot of my life and would kind of flip back and forth, and art would be a hobby and I would work professionally in engineering, or I would sort of switch, and eventually sort of in my 20s decided that just wasn't going to be the case for me. And I was going to do both of them. And I was immediately attracted to this idea of creating dynamic physical art that integrated computing with the goal of creating participation. And, you know, when I first started really thinking about this, it's no coincidence. It was right at the time that computers were taking off and, Google was being founded. And I was looking at the world around me, which was becoming more and more interactive. And, I didn't have a cell phone, but cell phones were on their way. And
right.
The potential for everything to be dynamic and participatory. And I saw it not only in all of the landscape of, the consumer universe around me, but I actually saw that also in art. And, our art has always been very relevant within its time. And so I think it's, to me, it seems very, it seems like it makes sense that you'd have artists start to play within this space. And I immediately started creating large interactive works.
Yeah. To me, it makes perfect sense. Engineering, regardless of the vertical of the engineering, the science that you're in, to me, it seems like it's like the perfect blend of science and art, right? To be an engineer. Well, I mean,
art in its entire history has always had science. I mean, even if you go back to you look at someone like Monet. I mean, part of what enabled Monet to go out and paint was the invention of the paint tube, which didn't exist before his selection of artists. And so you have this simple container invention that allows painters to go outside, and suddenly you have this entire movement of art that comes out of this. So there's that, and that's an example of technology in art. And you can look at photography. There's so many different examples of technology coming in and being integrated in art. In my case, I'm integrating the technology of our everyday lives into my art.
Right.
Yeah.
And, so what was your engineering? I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I actually see it both ways too. I mean, you can't necessarily learn science without art either. I mean, you can see in every science textbook, and you see drawings of these super intricate. I'm a biologist, so pictures of fish, but I can't go out and dissect a fish every single day. So a lot of the ways we learned was through these really beautiful and scientifically accurate images. So I almost see your work that way as well, as at least with The Last Ocean, almost showing people with art something science related without having them work too hard.
Yeah. I just don't see an engineer or a scientist being incredibly effective without that imagination and that artistic curiosity and creativity. I don't know.
That's so cool.
Maybe that's just. What was your engineering training? Was it computer science? You talked about computers a couple of times, or was it mechanical, or what?
So I actually studied architecture.
Okay.
I picked architecture though because at the time there was no such thing as a mixed media degree, which exists now. And so I picked an architecture program that allowed me to create my own degree, and the degree was focused on computer science and art. So I actually did computer science classes, extensive engineering, structural, civil engineering classes, and then also art. So you can see that, that shows up in all of my work. And then in my early process, I think one of the things that's unusual about the work that I do is that it is actually engineered in-house. So all of the circuit boards are created in-house and the software is written in-house. And
so cool.
This has allowed me, it's allowed me to sort of over the course of this, over the course of the last many years to really develop my own medium that I can play with and iterate within. And actually I can build the work. I'm not napkin sketching it and handing it off to someone else to build it. I'm the one experimenting in it. My team and I are working in it. We discover all of these things because we're actually building it, kind of fundamentally from the ground up.
So full creative control that way, right?
Yeah, full creative control, but also really, I think it's just that iterative cycle and the discoveries you make, which is so important, I think.
Yeah. Speaking of that, one of the things I want to ask you, and we'll get to it. Well, we'll just get to it right this second. How closely are the works once they're done to what you imagined in the beginning, or is it kind of like this concept that just evolves as you go?
Actually, in a very almost creepy way. And this has always been the case. I will make a computer rendering of what the piece is going to look like that will even show people on it and how it's going to interact. And then, years could go by of decisions and you forget about the rendering and something costs too much. You have to change something and the engineering fails in one. And so there's all these moments and pieces and it feels like you've completely strayed away from it. And then you build it and you go out and you install it and it looks exactly like the rendering.
Wow.
Every time.
Wow. Is that due to the fact
actually, as a team, think
so
a little bit funny.
That's a little creepy and very cool at the same time. But is it because of a commitment to something you're not going to sacrifice it and you let it take 5 years until the technology or you figure this particular engineered piece out? Or do you just kind of make compromises, but it works anyways?
It feels like we're making compromises, but I actually think that subconsciously my team and I really buy into the vision. And even though we're making these problem-solving compromises, the vision really just doesn't change. Even though it's almost unconscious that that's happening, because it surprises everyone, and it happens consistently. Yeah.
That's very cool. Well, you got a great team, is what it sounds like. Both my parents were artists; they were watercolor artists, and that's how they made their living. And but they didn't have teams telling them, how to paint or what to paint. How difficult is that doing an artistic? I mean, you're building this with this team. Does everybody have to buy into that vision and feel it, or is it like, can you be like cold managing and get Ursa right?
No, you can't do that.
I wouldn't think so, right? I mean, you can't take like Welch's management book or something like that, or Plan, Do, Check, Act circularity and put it into this form of management, right? It doesn't click.
Yeah, it doesn't. I mean, I will. So, originally it was just me, and I grew pretty organically. I will say kind of having an operating studio is really hard. It's just hard to do because it does mean that you do have to operate as a business in a proper business, as a proper business. And that's just challenging, as always. A small business is hard.
Yeah.
But, the team is also sort of the best part. It feels like family. It feels like you're inventing things together. The camaraderie, the discussions, the design charrettes. I mean, it's awesome. There's so much depth and greatness in those moments. And I think I would feel at this point, I'd feel very lonely if it was just me back alone in the studio again.
When it ties in so nicely with the concept of like interactive art, but it's also so interactive and community based to kind of get there, like you're building this small community of artists that help you and support you. And that's exactly what a lot of the art has aspects of too. So it's really interesting to hear. Yeah.
Cool. It is. I feel like there's a book, The Art of Management by Jen Lewin. It's an interesting. Well, I asked the question, and I think it's just accidentally a very interesting topic because you're doing both things. You're running a business and you're running an art studio at the same time, and the two management styles don't necessarily require completely different mixes of personality and imagination and ideation and management and all that, but certainly a different percentage of mixture for sure, right?
Yeah, I mean, like managing an art team is hard. It's definitely, I would say it's harder for me. I've had to learn more and made more mistakes along that front than I have on the art making side. And I definitely have to rely on support and expertise from other people to help. And some of the great, support on the team comes in helping me kind of keep the team moving and creating structures that, work for everyone and that are efficient and positive.
I have two last business management questions for you, if you don't mind indulging me. One, if you're hiring a new or looking for a new team member, right? Which I noticed on your site that I could apply if I wanted to. You probably wouldn't hire me, but I could apply or say that I wanted to join a team and probably why. What do you look for? What is more important to you? Is it my skill level on the particular vertical or section that you're hiring me for, or my creativity side and my cultural fit with the rest of the team?
I mean, it really has to be a balance of both. And it also really depends on the role. Like if I'm hiring engineering, the engineering we do is so unique to the studio. What I'm looking for then is someone who is really good at problem solving and learning things quickly and, can show kind of a track record of also working independently, because that's pretty important in a small team. But yeah, I mean, if you're looking for someone who's like, an unbelievable CAD designer, certainly they need to demonstrate those skills specifically in the software that we're using. But a lot of like the people who've ended up working here have come in with with a really amazing broad range of background skills, and that like actually creates for a richer studio environment because people bring these great points of view and they bring all this great expertise that might even be something I wouldn't have expected to the table.
Very cool. Very cool. I forget the other question. That's how my mind works. It was I love that. I love that answer. So let's dig into it more. So you got into the art. So you were a ballerina though. So why did you go to this form of art instead of the dance form in collaboration with your engineering? Or is the interactive nature of this really kind of rooted in that?
I mean, it has its root in that. It also, by the way, I realized when I was like at some point 10 years ago, I went back to Maui, and I grew up on Maui. I grew up like halfway up this volcano at about 10,000 feet in elevation, right where the clouds come in, like at eye level.
How cool.
And the effect is one of this like almost daily where you have the sun above the clouds, but you can kind of see above and below the clouds, and there'd be these crazy rays of light that came through. And I sort of sat there for 2 days and I was like, it's like, obviously I became a light artist. Like the experience of being here is so magical when you look at the lighting. And so,
yeah,
you know, that also like, so that, you know, that environment that I was in. And then the practice of ballet, and I went to a ballet studio every single day after school, all the way until I was 17.
Wow. Okay.
It was full on.
You were, so either you or your parents were committed.
My mother was also a dancer. So, I mean, I was crawling around a dance studio as well. So
Gotcha.
But what I discovered, and I had enough, I'm happy about this, but I had enough awareness to realize as a 17-year-old that what I loved about ballet, the rigor, the training, the structure of it, the creative freedom within the structure, the practice of it, I absolutely loved, but I didn't want to be a ballerina. The career of it was not something I wanted.
I gotcha.
But I loved that art practice. And so, you know, that kind of set me on this exploration of what and how could I create some of that same feeling, that rigor. You know, I like to work hard. Ballet has, you know, all this technique that's part of it. Could I bring that into another career and another field? And if you had asked me at the time, you know, would that be sculpture? I would not have thought it was going to be sculpture. That's just something that I think slowly evolved and I discovered through like a process of making things. But I will say, if you look at the sculpture, all of the sculpture invites you to move. It brings you in, you move your body, you dance. And so at the same time, even though I sort of left the ballet studio, I kind of created this method for everyone to sort of reintegrate movement in a participatory way in a physical art piece.
Yeah. I mean, you can hear it in there as well as like when you were describing going back to your hometown and looking through the light rays coming through the cloud layer. It's not just the beauty of it, but it's the beauty of that movement, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what I see in all this. Is there any particular piece of work here that was inspired by that moment when you were watching those?
Yeah. I've been making, I mean, it's kind of a stretch, but it is true. Like I started making laser harps in the 90s and part of it was because I had this memory of the light coming through and like dust particles in the light. And then I started playing with a very inexpensive like keychain laser pointer that I got on Canal Street in New York City. And that kind of
I've been there before.
Yeah, I found this idea that I was like, well, could it be interactive? Like what if when you passed your hand through the light, it created, you know, a tone, and then that turned into laser harps.
So those are like the sidewalk harp and the magical harp. Those pieces.
And you basically pass your hand through a light beam, and it creates music. You can dance and create music. Yeah.
Oh, that is very 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 cool. So we've got through all that stuff. So there's things that you talk about in there about or in your bio and about Jen Lewin in the studios that you talk about. The ripple effect and tapping into that energy of the single person and how that single person can inspire through the ripple effect and positively and I guess negatively, I believe, you know, yin and yang, I'm sure you understand it as well, is they affect their habitat, their community and so on and so forth. It just goes out, right? Kind of like the butterfly wings creates that hurricane, right? Can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah. So I, you know, I started making interactive sculptures. Actually, one of the first thing I made was a laser harp. I just described this idea of this interactive laser light piece, and I exhibited that in New York City, and people just lost their minds. They loved it. So I was like, oh, there's something here. And then I was really infatuated. You just said moths. I was really infatuated with moths, and so I made a sculpture after that, which were these giant ethereal silk moths hanging from the ceiling, and a single person would stand underneath them and they would set to movement. And so it was this kind of idea of like drawing people in, you know, using light, of course, like moths are attracted to light. I was drawing people into the light. But when I made that piece and then I reflected on the laser harp, I was like, the problem with these pieces is that, you know, it's like one person at a time. And it is like I'm catching someone into the artwork. What would happen if I made something bigger that like people could, you know, interact with it together as a group? And so that evolved into a sculpture that I created called the Pool in 2008. And when I made the Pool, and at the time I had made a bunch of other pieces and there were a bunch of other things going out, but I made the Pool, I took it out into the world, and that really changed everything for me because I saw that piece, which had 100 platforms out in a public park. And I watched the way people engaged with it. And then I most importantly watched the way people engaged together. And I was sort of transformed art-wise. And I wanted to just get bigger. I was like, how do we make them bigger? How do we bring more people in? How do we make it more public? How do we engage everyone? And so this just idea of this large, connected, collaborative experience together really kind of hit something in me, and I became infatuated with it. And so, you know, that really started, you know, many years of these big, large interactive pieces that you move and play on that enable hundreds of people to engage. And they have in them this very purposeful, discrete interaction that allows each person to feel like they're in control. Each person knows what they've done. Each person can directly interact with a platform that's within their own like space. This is mine. But then they can jump to another platform and interact with the crowd. So there's this wonderful play between feeling enabled and capable within it, but also very much part of a larger system that you can enjoy and be playful within. And so, you know, that to me is really interesting. I hadn't seen that in public art, hadn't seen that in public space. That kind of level of play and engagement in a park. In all ages too, right? This isn't just a playground. This isn't just kids. Like you've got little kids, you've got babies, you've got teenagers, you know, you've got people on TikTok, you've got grandma and grandpa, it's like the whole range, right? So I hadn't really seen that kind of full range of human engagement in a public place.
I mean, that was obviously a transformative moment for you, right?
It was, yeah.
And kind of did that, because to me, and maybe you're wrong, but your work and what you're doing there and just reading what you have done and listening to you talk, it appears to me that, you know, the mission, whether conscious or not, is to show people how their individuality needs to be celebrated, but it can also be
connected,
contributive and connected to everybody else. And that is that kind of your mission now? Is that kind of that showing people that their creativity and it's interactive with others is really the
matters? Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I fundamentally care about. I mean, I've been asked this on big permanent pieces, and they're like, "Well, but what do you think about, you know, the people in the building and who are going to see it?" And I'm like, "I care. That's why I made it interactive. I want them to be part of it, and I wouldn't do that if I didn't care. Like, I really want them to be part of it and to feel like they're part of it." You know, the one thing I also want to say that, because the initial, you know, this piece, the Pool, the initial sort of time I showed it was so changing for me, but the next phase of it was even more profound for me and for my whole team, which is that we started moving it around the world. And so here we have this piece that's going to all these very different seemingly different cultures, you know, from, you know, as different as like Bahrain to Chattanooga to Singapore.
It wasn't Chattanooga. You're right. And I was
to Sydney, and watching all these humans who speak different languages and come from all different religions and all different cultures, and watching them all act the same.
Yeah.
Entirely.
Yeah, cool. Bringing the whole world together.
And it was amazing.
All the differences, right?
Yeah, it was really that one was very like changed everyone on my team who was part of those years of touring.
So do you think that type of interaction of people is more transformative for them rather than getting on a soapbox and preaching that we're all the same and we should be together?
I don't know. I mean, that I'm not sure if because part of seeing that sameness came from my team that was traveling it around. So it's hard to know that, in each of the environments, I think everyone just had a really fun, playful community experience. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know necessarily if
I would think people would take away from that. I think it's very, very cool that occurred. I absolutely love that story. Is the pool your favorite piece?
It's one of my favorites.
Do you even have one?
Yeah, I love them all. That's like asking like who your favorite child is.
Right.
That's funny.
No comment.
Which piece do you feel is the most unique? Do you have a most unique piece, or one you feel especially proud of?
No, I really love them all. I also sometimes hate them all too. So it's they've all stressed me out. I have complicated relationships with all of them.
Of course, right.
Do you prefer the interactive ones that travel around and go to shows, or do you prefer the ones that are installations? I mean, do you do the permanent installations because, or which is your favorite to do? The types.
Same thing. There's like such strong pros and cons for both. I wouldn't be able to say which I prefer or not. The temporary ones have a big opening and there's often more engagement initially around it, but the permanent ones are like discovered for years and like truly loved. So they're just different. They're very different. And they both, they just have different emotional experiences with each of them.
Yeah.
They're very
so
cool.
I love the connection too. Something that I was definitely picking up on is the connection between art, community, but then also nature. Like it seems like a lot of your pieces, and for those of you who don't know, people who are listening that might not know your art, there's the Ursa Minor that you've been talking about, that bear, the moths that were inspired, even some things such as like seeing the sunbeams in Hawaii that ends up in a harp. How do you feel like that connection shines through in your work?
Yeah, every single piece has its root in a natural experience. It's interesting because they're so high tech in the end, right? So you wouldn't necessarily think that. But even the pool, which I was describing in the story, that evolved because I was camping in a place where there were tidal pools, like an infinite sea of tidal pools. The moon came out and they were reflecting in the tidal pools and I was running around, jumping in them. And so that piece evolved out of that natural lighting moment. Like every single sculpture has this like non-electronic earth moment where I see something and I'm like, I want to make something like that. And it comes from nature. And then it does end up being so high tech in the end. But yeah, that's
what I was going to ask. You think that turning like a nature concept into something so high tech helps people relate to that or understand it in a somewhat different way? Or is there, I guess, are you thinking in your head, this is how I want someone to interpret this, or this is what I want to show someone, or are you kind of letting it flow organically with?
I'm letting it flow organically. Yeah. I feel a little uncomfortable about telling people what their experience should be in the work.
Yeah.
I'm more interested in seeing what they think themselves. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's really cool that you're taking a very natural experience that strikes you and then utilizing high tech to then create that same very simple natural experience that blows somebody else's mind or causes this really impactful interaction. I think that's amazing to me. That's what I find really cool about it, and that's why I just think it's awesome. I'm a huge fan. What was the hardest piece to put together? Was it one out of South Africa? I won't be mad if you say so. But what was the hardest piece to do?
Well, the last ocean took the longest to do.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was the hardest, but it was the longest to do. I mean, the pool piece was the hardest because we had to rebuild the pool almost 8 times entirely.
Oh, wow.
Wow. Turns out that, I mean, each of the platforms, so these hundreds of these platforms, they go in any climate, any environment, rain, snow, water, you know, you name it. And each one has a computer in it that's built in-house. And, you know, it turns out most computers don't like to be jumped on by 1,000 people in a night.
Especially when it's like 40 degrees and raining.
Right. So it's hard to do. And one of the reasons why you don't see that a lot in the world is because it's so hard. And so there was a really huge learning curve in figuring out how to do that well. And my team, we're pros at making that kind of stuff right now at this point. So that was hard just because there was so much learning and iteration, and there were so many mistakes that needed to be redone and recalibrated. And that's still happening, by the way, with the ground pieces. There's like no end to the learning of what can happen. So by the time the Last Ocean, which was, you know, Last Ocean is the fourth big ground-based piece I've done.
Gotcha.
There were really big challenges with the Last Ocean that had to do mainly with the plastic sourcing and my very strong desire to have it be built out of ocean plastic. But the rest of it was actually reasonably easy. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that ocean it is difficult. I was familiar with the struggles that they were having there, and they basically had to reinvent. They had to invent a whole new way of forming those sheets in order to make it work with the temperature on the top and the bottom. It was pretty crazy and great engineering, and it wouldn't have been done if you hadn't kept pushing for it to be done. So that was, I think it was awesome. You mentioned learning more and more on the ground pieces, et cetera. So along with the art, there's some maintenance aspect to this as well, right?
There's tons of maintenance. Yeah. There's maintenance. There's, we have what's called a flip. When a piece will go out, a temporary piece will come back and it has to get completely refurbished. So, you know, part of the reason I have a team is this constant refurbishing process that has to happen. And then sort of there's lifespans for these. They have to be rebuilt. You know, we're reusing everything we can, but there's still just, you know, there's rebuilding that has to happen. One of the pieces I have out in the world right now needs an entire, you know, needs to be fully refurbished,
almost rebuilt, completely rebuilt.
Almost rebuilt completely, yeah, almost recycled and rebuilt. So that's definitely an active, ongoing process, and learning. You know, climate is a big piece of it. Certain climates just really are, you know, hard. It's not actually, temperature is not the big issue. It's really just water. Water's the big one.
Is that right?
Yeah, it's really just, it's water. Heat and cold are fine. So, you know, those are all just pieces that took a long time to learn. And that kind of carries down to the thousands of small electronic components and plugs and types of wires and types of LEDs and the thousands of things that are in those units that really need to be thought about in a very different way.
Yeah. So the pictures of you in the dust storm at Burning Man trying to put the Last Ocean together and stuff, that's no big deal. That's just part of the job.
Well,
right?
That's different. That's an install at Burning Man. Installs at Burning Man are just hard regardless of the sculpture.
It's like, wow, that is commitment right there. That is commitment.
Yeah.
Do you have a piece? Is there something in the back of your mind? Is there this thing in the back of your mind that you're like, someday I'm going to do that. Someday I'm going to have a life-size replica of the Empire State Building or something like that. Is there that, man, that I'm going to figure out?
I would actually love to have some large floating pieces. This is something I've been talking to different people for about 10 years, to have something that can be kind of elevated in the air and maybe like fly, or kind of epically come across the sky. So that would be real. I would love to do something like that. I can tell you right now, I'm working on a new giant version Ursa Major, because we did the Bear Ursa Minor.
Oh, yeah. Well, you got to have, you got to have the next one. Yeah.
Ursa Minor is about 12 feet tall, and Ursa Major will be 34 feet tall, so 3 times the height.
Wow.
So really big.
I love it. I love it. Is it going to be just a bigger Ursa, or is there more to it that you're not going to share?
Much more to it. Yeah.
All right.
You'll be able to walk inside, and sort of her whole inside will be almost like a cathedral of infinity mirrors.
How cool. Awesome. Is that going to be, is that one going to travel, or is that an install, or?
It's being designed to travel. Yeah.
Oh, sweet.
Wow.
Sweet. Very cool. Very cool.
Pretty awesome.
How about a location or a show? Is there a location or a show or something like that
Coming
that would
up?
be? No, that would be your. Yeah, there you go. I want one in the rotunda in the Capitol building, or I want one in the middle of Red Square, the Kremlin, or whatever. Is there anything like that
I
there?
would love to take something like the Last Ocean to Iceland or to Antarctica. I'd love to take it to like Antarctica. I mean, that'd be the most amazing. But I don't know if I'd have a bunch of people there. I would love to do a show in Iceland.
Would you run the Aurora over top of it?
Maybe.
Wow.
Large ice landscape. Yeah, large ice landscape would be so visually amazing. The great city centers are also all awesome. I mean, one of my favorite shows was in Tokyo. I love cities. I live in New York City. So I wouldn't turn down a show in any of the great city centers, but visually, I would love to take the Last Ocean, which is new, to a place that is an ice field and have it in a location like that.
Yeah, that would be really nice. I was wondering, I for some people might not know what Burning Man is. Some people might not know what the Last Ocean is. So for some
I figured if I knew what Burning Man was, then everybody does.
So I'm sure most people do, but you never know. So, but like for someone who's unfamiliar with your work, how would you describe the Last Ocean and what it means to you and what is special about it and what's important and like personally, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, wow, that would be so cool on ice. But maybe describing, for someone who doesn't know, why would that be cool?
Yeah, so the Last Ocean is actually one of the projects that I took the longest in my art practice. I conceptualized it over 10 years ago, and I had actually seen there was a photographer named John Weller, and he had this beautiful book titled The Last Ocean, and the book was a bunch of photos of the Ross Ice Shelf in Antarctica. And I was mesmerized by the photos. And the book was a call to action for conservation of the shelf. And I immediately I met him and I told him, I was like, I want to make a sculpture called The Last Ocean. And I want it to be this expansive, massive ice field, fractured landscape. So that kind of percolated in my brain, and years went by. And actually during shelter in place, my team and I were in shelter in place in New York and started kind of talking about what it might look like to make the Last Ocean. And I said, well, if we make it, we have to make it authentically climate positive. And so I want it to be made out of plastic trash. It should be ocean trash because that's where the piece is coming from. And we really have to think about the entire sculpture from a climate perspective. And then I also want, the shape of it is going to be tricky because it's going to be this fractured landscape. Each piece can't be different. That'd be too wasteful in terms of looking at like creating it efficiently. And so, over time, this piece evolved, and it's called The Last Ocean. It's made out of reclaimed plastic trash from the ocean. I worked with Ocean Plastic Technologies in South Africa to build it. And the fractal landscape is also this amazing story. It's this incredible tessellated pattern developed by a woman named Marjorie Rice, who was a mathematician in the 70s. So her story is super cool. Anyone who likes math should definitely read about Marjorie Rice. But what you have in the end is this large, kind of massive 20,000 square foot interactive landscape created out of plastic trash that sort of looks like a fractured landscape of ice. And as you stand on it, it lights up, and it's an interactive play landscape. And it travels around outside. It's been traveling. It's gone actually to Detroit. It was at Canal Convergence in Scottsdale, Arizona. It's at the San Francisco Exploratorium right now. So it'll be there just for another week if someone's in San Francisco. And then the biggest is it's going to go to Vivid Sydney in Australia in May.
Wow.
Oh, wow, cool.
Exciting.
That's
it is very cool. It is a very, and I think it looks
actually
awesome.
I love the juxtaposition too of it being like in the desert and then it being in Sydney.
And then it went to Burning Man.
Notoriously like not super icy. I kind of love that. I mean, it would be cool in Iceland or Antarctica as well, but there's something cool about that.
Each layout's pretty cool because each layout's totally unique. So every place that it travels to, I sit down with the team and we look at different ice shelf forms, and it resembles some sort of existing specific ice shelf or glacial form in the world. Yeah. So each layout is a very specific, purposeful glacial form.
So you could see it 1,000 times and it would be different.
It would always be
in
different.
every location. Wow, that's really cool.
Yeah.
It
was very dusty at Burning Man, I will say. So it's nice. As much as it was great having it at Burning Man, it's nice having it at less dusty exhibitions.
So Jen, let me ask you this: when you go and you look at your bio and you go and you look at the press and everything that you've accomplished there, is there an award there that means the most to you, or what is the accomplishment that you're most proud of right now?
That's such a tricky question.
Well, it doesn't have to be a specific award. I mean, it can be the fact that you learned how to make, authentic drunken Taiwanese noodles last night. I don't know.
I mean, I think just the fact that there's this consistent inbound to keep making the work, and there's consistent requests for new work, very pointed, requests for permanent projects that are so exciting, and that's enough of an award for me. I mean, that seems amazing. That's what you would dream of as an artist.
Yeah.
And the projects are all really fun. I mean, the Rotary Club there's a Rotary Club in Arlington, Texas, has their 100-year anniversary, and they wanted a big sculpture, and they came to me and I worked with them, and we've got this awesome sculpture that's really playful and fun and amazing, but also, really calls back to the history of the Rotary. So that's a great sort of community piece that I'm super excited about.
So when they said, "Hey, the Rotary Club in Austin's on the phone for you," Jen, did you go, "What?"
In
real?
Arlington, Texas. Let's chat about it. They,
Arlington. Yeah.
Those community groups that kind of find me and come to me, and we end up building a piece together. That's awesome.
It is. Yeah. I had no idea what you were doing until I ran into you via OPT, and I'm a huge fan and I love it, and people need to check it out. Is there cool? Where are you going to next? That people can check out. What's the next coolest thing that people can check out?
Yeah. So that'll be Vivid Sydney, which is, Vivid Sydney is one of the largest, kind of well-known light festivals in the world. So, we're going to have a giant version of the Last Ocean there, that will resemble Antarctica, but with a bunch of the ice shelves calved off. And we'll be there, for sort of late May through June.
Through June.
Yeah. And then we have a big, beautiful permanent piece going into Arlington, Texas. I'm super excited about.
Not Austin, Arlington.
Yeah, Arlington. Another big piece going into the center of Cincinnati, which will be really cool.
Oh, how neat. Neat.
Yeah. I'm working on Ursa Major, which hopefully we'll have done in the fall. So
nice.
And then a bunch of other sort of smaller projects.
So did Cincinnati get a flying hog? You know how they have the flying pigs on the bridge there and stuff? It used to be Hogopolis. Did you know that? Forget it. Doesn't matter. So people can find all this stuff out at jenlewinstudio.com and go check out the artwork and check out what she's doing and what you're doing there. I think it's awesome, Jen. I thank you so much for being on the Sustainiacs. It's been great.
Yeah, so cool.
I love what you're doing. So, hey, everybody, we are the Sustainiacs. You can reach out to us at thesustainiacs@gmail.com or search us anywhere on the web. It's Sustainiacs. Michael Vincent on LinkedIn. Check out Jen Lewin, because you can find Jen Lewin on LinkedIn and all the social media. She's constantly posting really cool stuff, or just go right to her website, jenlewinstudio.com. Emma, where are you at these days besides Boston?
Same thing, Sustainiacs. You can reach me there, Emma_Sustainiacs, if you want to follow me specifically. And again, LinkedIn, Emma Wightman. So please definitely hit us up. And if you have any questions for Jen, we can totally get them her way, or any crazy egg burning ideas you just need her to hear. But yeah, Jen, it's been amazing. It's been very interesting to chat about all this cool community and nature and the connections that we make and form with artwork. So really appreciate you having me on.
Awesome. Well, it's a pleasure to be here. Yeah.
It's awesome stuff. Yeah. I can't wait to take my kids to one of these things and dance on them. They're going to be.
I want to see one. I've never seen one.
Thank you so much. Peace and love.
All right. Thank you.